Oh, that's right.
Good morning. I'll call this meeting to order at 10 a.m. Kettle Creek Conservation Authority wishes to acknowledge the Treaty of the Traditional Lands originally occupied by the Indigenous First Nations peoples of the Anishinaabe, Attawandarock, and Haudenosaunee Nations. Kettle Creek Conservation Authority strives to build meaningful relationships with Indigenous communities and recognizes the importance of respecting these treaties and lands. Does any member have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. Minutes of the last meeting. We have the two meetings, February 5th, the full authority, and the AGM on February 26th.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just before we get to that, can I do a roll call since some members are joining online?
Sure.
Todd Noble,
Here.
Lori Baldwin-Sands. Here. Frank Burrs.
Here.
Jim Herbert.
Here.
Grant Jones.
Here.
Sharon McMillan.
Here.
Jerry Pribble. And I'm sorry, Jerry did send his regrets. JJ Strybosh.
Here.
Sam Trousseau.
Here.
John Wilson.
Here.
And we have 9 out of 10 members present.
Okay. Mover and seconder for the minutes, if there's no issues. Lori and Frank.
Baldwin-Sands.
Yes.
Frank Burrs.
Yes.
Jim Herbert.
Yes.
Grant Jones.
Yes.
Sharon McMillan.
Yes.
JJ Strybosh.
Yes.
Sam Trousseau.
Yes.
John Wilson.
Yes.
And Todd Noble.
Yes.
And that motion's carried.
Okay. Matters of right. Report from Betsy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much of the media from the past month centered around the new Lake Whitaker cabins, and Jesse did a great job of putting that out there for all to see what they will look like. So as you can see, this one sneak peek post had a reach of 68,000 unique users, which is pretty amazing how far that went. Next slide. He also created a number of videos that just showcased the arrival of the cabins on site and what they look like that had good response as well. And lastly, we had an article in the Elmer Express where Jen talked about the thaw event that we had.
Excellent.
Good.
Lori?
If I may make a comment on the cabins, I share many of the events that are happening at KCCA on my personal Facebook page, and it received a ton of traction there as well. So it's amazing how much the people are being engaged, especially local people, and thinking what a great way to just to have a staycation. So applaud to all the staff for this initiative and to keeping it going. It's pretty impressive.
Jim?
To the chair, great job here, Betsy. Those cabins look great. I agree with Lori. Just questioning or asking, when can they be rented? Have they already rented now, or do they go up to be rented? Or to be rented?
Reservations open April 1st for the season, and I think sometime in May is when they'll
May
be available.
24 is, I think, the first available
Okay.
dates.
I put a note on my Facebook thing, and all my family from Windsor is like, when can we rent all 4? So, yeah, it'll be.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Deals are in your house.
Yeah.
Traction on that post is excellent. That's great.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure, Sam.
Yeah, on the social media, there's a lot of controversy these days about whether or not public entities should stay on Twitter, X, whatever. And they do because they have an installed base. But at the same time, there is Blue Sky, which has emerged as sort of a really good alternative. And I'm hoping that we can set up a Blue Sky account and start getting people on there.
What language was he speaking?
Blue Sky is a Blue Sky is a social media outlet that's similar to what Twitter X does, but it's becoming very popular.
Okay.
Entity.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Chair, we can have staff look into that and consider it.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Sam. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Sure.
And project tracking, Elizabeth?
Oh.
So lots of activity on the cabins. We've come up with a marketing and promotional plan and we'll be enacting that over the next couple of months. We facilitated a presentation on March 18th to Fanshawe College students on environmental monitoring and source water protection. Jennifer looked after that. The Kettle Creek Environmental Youth Corps applications are live now. If any of you have young people looking for volunteer hours or just interested in pursuing environmental studies as a career option, that's a great opportunity for them to get involved locally as well. Preparations are underway. All the programs are gearing up, tree planting, camping as well. We've been doing our seasonal hiring, and the seasonal camper applications went live for the coveted sites that we have available this year. And at Lake Whitaker, the application went live at 9 and shut down by 9:22 with people interested in those sites. So great news for hopefully another good camping season. And I did, just picking up on that discussion about the cabins, I did ask Mike to attend today just to give you a brief update on it and play the videos for those of you who didn't see the social media videos on the cabins. So we're just going to play those quickly, and then Mike was here to ask any questions you had. And the next video, for those who hadn't seen it, this was just behind the scenes of the cabins actually being located on the sites. And we thought some people might find it interesting just to see how we got these cabins back onto those sites. So this is just a behind the scenes look at that.
That's for sure. They should be called cabins. They look really good.
It was pretty slick, that thing they had for moving. It was quite great in their place. It was like, holy crap. I was sort of wondering how you're just gonna get them in there. Like, how does this start?
Drove them.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? So what's the foundation? Are they blocks, cement or no?
So they're on gravel pads. So it's a 12-inch 8 gravel packed pad that's a good dimension.
Okay.
They're probably dug pretty deep, probably 3-4 feet deep with gravel.
That's a 12-inch pad.
Yeah.
12-inch. Yeah, so I just saw the video, so we did a great job as a marketing team to put that together. So those videos were awesome. As you guys seen, had a lot of really good feedback and traction on those as well. So that's fantastic. So yeah, all 4 of them are in place now. And as I said, the reservations are going live April 1st. So really excited to see how those reservations come up on April 1st.
What time do they go on?
I believe 9 o'clock.
Wow. Okay.
Get the date.
So, and like I mentioned before as well, so starting the May 241 weekend, the first reservations will be able to be had down there. Yeah, so we still have lots of work to do, kind of those final touches and little odds and ends and getting that work done yet, but getting them in place was a huge first step, and still lots of work to do, but we're still working our way towards that. And if happy days or any other questions, if anybody has any other questions.
Through the chair, before they're all rented by Mr. Wilson, is there a long-term vision of more than 4?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, so that's been part of the discussion when this all happened, is something that, if this goes really well, then that's something I think we'd all be excited to see. But yeah, so kind of, yeah, something we all would love to see, but kind of to see how this all goes first, but if it goes well, definitely conversations to have down the road for sure.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's awesome. I would think that would be something that will take off quite quickly.
You want to rent, and you better rent them in a hurry.
Yeah. Okay. Lakeshore improvement, that was Michael's, okay. Watershed conditions, Jennifer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had the spring freshet, which was quite a lot, well, it was easier than hoped. So it was a nice slow melt. We didn't have a lot of rain, even though we had a ton of snow. We had the spring freshet was kind of broken up into two parts. We had, end of February where all the snow melted and we had some high water, and then March, all the rest of the ice went out. So it was actually a nice spring event. But we did have some media releases put out related around that. So February, March, and March 4th, March 14th. But everything went as good as it could go. So I was pretty happy with that.
Thank you.
And then, sorry, Mr. Chair. Just a few other points. Lake Erie water levels are quite low right now. They're around long-term average. We only had about 26% of our average monthly amount of rain in February, but that's pretty normal. Usually we get snow instead of rain, so that's pretty normal. And water levels were low enough and perfect weather. So March 19th and 20th, the stop logs were put back into Dalewood Dam for the rest of the season.
Okay, Jim?
To the chair, if we had heavy rain for 4 or 5 days, would there be a concern of flooding?
That would have been a much higher risk for ice jamming.
Because I know I live at the top of Fingall Hill, and I could see Kettle Creek. Well, 3 weeks ago, it was totally blocked up on the creek side with all logs and snow and everything, all gone now. So it was great to have that, like you said, to slow down. So
yeah, ideally you want warm days, no rain, and cool nights to keep things from jamming up, and it's great.
Is that all you asked for?
That's all I asked for.
All good.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Yarmouth Yards Industrial Park compensation, Betsy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we just thought we'd provide a summary. We've sort of talked about some of these projects a little bit, but I thought I'd provide a sort of comprehensive overview. So the Yarmouth Yards Industrial Park development required compensation measures to address habitat loss on site. So the city of St. Thomas requested our assistance to meet their compensation requirements. And so this partnership has allowed KCCA basically to expedite some of the restoration work on the newly acquired properties of Deer Ridge and Stanley Lyle Grove. And so there's a variety of projects that we'll be completing over the coming years at those two properties as part of this partnership. So I'll just highlight some of the projects that have been completed or are currently underway. So wetland creation, 3 wetlands were created in fall of 2024. So we did one wetland cell at the Stanley Lyle Grove and 2 at Deer Ridge Conservation Area. A 4th is planned to be completed at Stanley Lyle Grove in the coming years once we've taken care of some phragmites management on site. And you can see there's just 2 pictures. Those are the two wetland cells that were created at Deer Ridge Conservation Area. It's amazing how quickly, these were immediately after construction, but it's amazing how much these have already sort of started to blend into the landscape and look really great on the property. The next initiative is there was a large tract of agricultural land at the Stanley Lyle Grove that we're looking to restore over the coming years. So between this spring and next spring, we'll be planting over 13,000 native trees and shrubs. We will be establishing tall grass prairie on site prior to tree planting. And this will basically be a cover crop. But it also provides additional habitat benefits until that eventual succession into forest habitat many years later. So you can see there's 10 species of different trees we will be planting, a mix of conifers and deciduous trees, as well as 5 different species of shrubs. Next slide. There's a lot of forested lands on the property. Significant populations of European buckthorn, autumn olive, and invasive honeysuckle. So we've already started invasive species management on these species throughout the woodlands on the property, but that will be an ongoing effort as we monitor the treatment and look for any areas that need retreatment over the years. And as I mentioned, within the woodlot at the Stanley Lyle Grove, there is a patch of Phragmites, so we'll be tackling that over the coming years, and then looking at reestablishing a wetland in an open area of that woodlot.
Can I ask a question there, Betsy? How do you handle that? Is it just cutting it back down to ground level? That's it?
Cutting and treating with herbicide.
Okay, so it is a herbicide.
Yeah.
So is this Phragmites just from like landscaping places putting in these tall grasses and then it just spreads?
Well, in this case, it's in the middle of the woodlot, so it's coming. I mean, the seed's coming from somewhere. It's in ditches, it's all over. So in this case, it's not coming necessarily from a landscaping, I'm guessing, but.
That's sort of the origin of it.
Yeah, brought over.
Yeah.
From that purpose and then has taken
It's
over.
just a shame
Yeah.
that it's just.
I can stop it.
Well,
This is
just
all European, right?
ornamental.
Comes from Europe?
I think a variety of countries, yeah. Next slide. There's a 2-acre block on the Stanley Lyle Grove that will be planted into tall grass prairie in spring of 2026. So that'll be a diverse mix of native grasses and wildflowers. You can see some of the species there that we would typically see planted in our tall grass prairie areas. And as you probably know, tall grass prairie is very limited in this area. So we're always looking for suitable spots where we can plant prairie for the pollinator species. This area in particular on the Stanley Lyle Grove is sort of an anomaly on the site. It's actually quite sandy. So that's why we decided that this would be an ideal site for the tall grass prairie. And lastly, meadow restoration is a component of the project. There's 2 areas at Deer Ridge Conservation Area that will be restored. So there's a 3-acre hydro corridor, which you would have walked along during the opening of Deer Ridge, as well as a 6.5-acre retired pasture. And both of those currently have a mix of grasses and broadleaf weeds with some intermixed woody invasive species. So we'll be looking at best ways to treat those species and eventually restore it to more of a true tall grass prairie and meadow habitat. Last slide. And just a note about the project. So the work that we're doing on our properties will be assessed by the city's they call it a qualified professional to determine the compensation value of all the work that we are doing. And KCCA is responsible for monitoring and reporting back to the city on the projects for the next 10 years. So that'll include tree survival assessments and then qualitative observations on the success of the prairie, the meadow restoration, wetland creation, as well as the invasive species management.
Just a question. You may have told us, what was this an old industrial park then that's been?
This is,
Yarmouth?
I'll let maybe the city representatives talk about that.
Thank you. With the mega site for VW,
Okay,
we have been required to do restorative work in and around the community within a certain
okay.
radius of the city itself in order to restore not just the wetlands that were taken away, some of the farmlands, but most importantly, the tree. the tree replanting and the wildlife, including habitat development. I do have a couple of comments when you're finished your report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Betsy's.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Lori.
May I?
Yep.
I have a whole bunch because this is a great concern for me, and thank you very much for this report. The habitat restoration, I noticed with the actual site, we've done bat boxes and woodpecker boxes, which was not in your report. Are they going to be carried over to the Stanley Lyle tract and to Deer Ridge as well?
Yeah, through the chair to you, Lori. So that's part of the initial conversations with the city is they have so many that need to be constructed and erected, and they've done some on their own city property. But there will be discussions about putting some of those up on our properties as well.
Thank you. And it's going to be monitored by whom and for what period of time?
The boxes are being monitored by a private consultant, so I don't know the actual timelines for the bat or bird boxes.
And that report is going to be reported to whom?
For the boxes by the consultant?
For the boxes, and what is the purpose of that? I'm sorry, we discussed it previously at one of our other meetings.
So we're gonna house the boxes, but as far as the monitoring and reporting of that will be done by the city's consultant. So we're open to having them on our property. We just won't be involved in the annual monitoring of what's in them or who's using them.
Correct. So it's going to be scientific and it's done with a relationship with universities that are doing research on the bat population, correct?
I think it'll probably be in tandem with that, and I think the city is lined up like a biological consultant as well.
Thank you.
Is that it, Lori?
Nope.
You got another one? All right.
Got more. The archaeological report that was done on the mega site has a copy of that final report come to KCCA. Okay, so I asked for that to be done and hopefully I'll do some follow-up on that. One of the most important things that we hear at council, and Jim can back me up on this, is the tree planting and the concern for the public to get those trees and the wetlands and the new habitat restoration back into the public sphere. So it's, what is the communication plan, and is there a possibility that deputation can be made to city and county councils, especially in our certain reference committee that we have, in order to bring all members of council up to date, because it is frequently asked questions around our council table about especially about the tree planting and the habitat. So is there a plan to do that, or if I may?
Share to Lori, we've had discussions with our city staff representatives. We shared this report with them. But maybe I can have a offside conversation with you and Jim in terms of how we would bring that back to the city council.
I think it would be beneficial, especially to let the public know, as well as members of council, because this is something that is discussed at great length in the community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One question for you, Lord. Do you know how many trees have to be replaced?
I think
Is there a number?
Elizabeth and Betsy could answer that question better, because
It's hard to, Mr. Chair, I think it's hard to say how many trees can be replaced because there is a formula based on trees versus habitat restoration. So it's a little difficult to narrow it down to they were required to replant this many trees, because it is a calculation that they're doing.
Okay,
it's not a one-for-one replacement.
okay. So like not even acre for acre?
It's there's habitat enhancement versus habitat creation, and they're given different values in their permit, as far as I understand. So yeah, it's not about this many trees came down, this many trees will be replanted. It very much is on the acreage lost. But it's all governed by the permit that they were provided by the ministry.
Okay.
There is a project management and there is a scorecard that they attach to it, and that report does come back to council, but it's very, very minimal. It's 2 lines in the report and it's all green that they've accomplished all of these thresholds. But it's basically a scorecard that is kept by city staff in order to make sure we meet those thresholds in the timeline that has been established for the mega site.
Okay. I guess my question is the city's qualified person determines compensation value. Will that compensation value be equal to our costs for KCCA for the stuff we've done? Or greater than or less than? Do we have an idea of that?
So as part of this, we did provide a costing proposal to the city of what these efforts would cost to do. So they're compensating us to do the work for them.
So it's equal to our costs?
Are we recovering our cost? Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's always good. Any other questions?
Yeah, going back to the invasive honeysuckle, is that something that started out in the garden and just has spread, or is it someplace else, or?
Through the chair to you, Grant, I'm not sure in this case, but invasive honeysuckle is rampant in many of the woodlots around here. So I don't think it's necessarily specific to this, the residential property adjacent. I think if you look in many of the woodlots in this area, you'll find invasive honeysuckle.
Anybody else? Just a reminder, the folks online, we don't always see you, so don't be afraid to speak up. Okay, moving on to correspondence. Elizabeth?
Mr. Chair, if we could just have a motion to receive matters arising A through E, that would be.
Sure. Moved by Grant, seconded by Jim.
Lori Baldwin Sands,
Yes,
Frank Burrs,
Yes.
Herbert,
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Skybosh.
Yes.
Trousseau,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
and Noble.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, not much correspondence today, but I did want to highlight just as you are all aware that the new cabinet was introduced and there is some things of interest to the Conservation Authority. Mainly our own Minister Rob Flack was appointed to the Minister of Housing and Affairs, Municipal Housing and Affairs, and then that's a copy and paste error.
Is that his cousin?
Yeah. We have a new minister of, the Minister of Environment and Conservation Parks, and I am Todd, I can't think of his last name.
Starts with an R, I think.
So we have a new minister of Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and then also a new minister, Mike Harris Jr. takes over the natural resources portfolio. The thing of interest, though, is that we have been moved back in ministers. We've flipped back over to MECP again. I'm not sure. Todd McCarthy, sorry, my apologies, Todd. We're not sure how that is going to really affect our portfolio at all, but I think it is of interest that they've chosen to move us back to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. We've been flip-flopped a couple of times now during this regime. So it's flipping back to MECP, and I'll keep you updated as we move forward and get more information from that ministry.
Frank?
I can't let this moment pass. The federal government runs the country with 24 ministers and the province requires 37. That's it. You can move on.
It's a very large province.
Yeah, very hard to manage.
John?
Does Mike Harris Jr. have better qualifications than golf pro?
Is he a golf pro?
No, his dad was, that was his qualification to be great.
That's it for correspondence.
That's it for correspondence. All right.
Just checking.
I think it's beneficial that we have Minister Flack in the position he is for our local riding. I think there's definitely value in that. I'll speak to my part. Okay, new business. Personnel policy update.
Yeah, so staff conducted a full review of the personnel policy. There was a number of changes to the Employment Standards Act that I wanted to make sure were reflected in our updated policies. It was also time to do some housekeeping housekeeping to the policy as well, updating titles, and also important to include more inclusive pronouns throughout the document as well. The substantive changes were outlined in the advanced package in red, and then we did also provide a summary chart. The whole package was communicated out to staff February 19th, so that's some time to review the document and provide comments or concerns back. There were no substantive comments or concerns submitted by staff. So just to highlight a couple of the changes, as I mentioned, we've now included an inclusive work environment statement and working not only in our personnel policy, but throughout our documents to use inclusive pronouns. The recruitment and selection policy was also updated. I wanted to include electronic options for conducting interviews and putting some parameters around how we conduct those electronic interviews. The parameters are very consistent to what we did to the administrative bylaw in terms of making sure that everybody can see and hear everyone involved in the interview or the meeting. The general conditions of employment didn't change drastically, but better reflect the contract and seasonal staff use now of electronic timesheets rather than handwritten timesheets, and the management processes that we use now for those electric timesheets. Leaves of absences were updated. Basically, we consolidated the bereavement days into 5 for immediate family, including parents, children, spouses, and partners, and 3 for in-laws and grandparents. It basically just flattened the hierarchy of importance to those relatives. The leaves of absences, that was the major change in terms of the Employment Standards Act, just bringing that up to date and including a child leave and a long-term illness leave. All of those leaves that are mentioned in that document follow the ESA, but I think it's important that we try to outline them as best we can in the personnel policies, that when people come on board, they get familiarized with those leaves. But we would always fall back to the Employment Standards Act for any of the requirements of those leaves. The employee benefits, again, just housekeeping. There was a change to OMERS policy in 2023, where we now have to offer that to seasonal and contract staff. It's optional for them to join, so that's now reflected in the policy. Vacation was updated just mainly to allow a little bit greater flexibility. The vacation policy was very restrictive in terms of what staff could be off when for a larger period than a week. So I've updated that language just to reflect the minimum staff that we would want to have here to basically carry forward the business of the authority. It gives a little bit more flexibility for different staff to be off at different times, which we are finding difficulties in doing in the way that the old policy was worded. Expenses and travels, this is one that I would highlight today. At 47 cents, the old policy was severely outdated. And I just find now with the changes in mileage and kilometers, I've looked at a lot of other policies and they simply refer to that the mileage rate would be the one posted to the Canada Revenue Agency every year. So CRA always posts a mileage every year. So I've updated the wording to reflect that. So we don't have to keep going back in and updating the policy. It's being kept current with inflation by following the CRA. So effective with the approval of this policy, the mileage the CRA has set currently is 72 cents. And so that would be reflected both for board and staff moving forward for this year. Clothing, I did increase the clothing and boot allowances, but they are still subjective to GM approval. I was just looking for, again, more flexibility to stay current with current pricing without having to open up the policy all the time. And the final one was just a recognition program, again, allowing a little bit more flexibility for retirement recognition, updating it from $300 to as approved by the board of directors. So all in all, I think they're pretty minor updates, make sure it's one of our key policies is keeping with the times.
Any questions, Lori?
Well, first a comment, I would like to thank our board again for the recognition that was received at the AGM to grant tonight. That was part of the policy. Second, as a mother of daughters, I am very, very grateful of the updates that you've been doing to the policy in regards to parental leave and pregnancy leave, et cetera, and making sure that KCCA stays incredibly competitive in the job market for this, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you, Jim.
Chair, thanks Elizabeth for this report. Obviously, there's a lot of work that went into it. I took the time to read all the red just to see the changes, and there was nothing really outstanding, but there was one that I kind of caught my attention, and I'm not sure why. It's on page 40, being alone with children. You're saying that no staff could not be alone with a child or children or a child or unless they grab someone else to back them up to say that they're not doing anything to them. But think of all the professions. Think of teaching. I mean, teachers are alone all the time with students one-on-one, doesn't matter male or female. Hospital, you're one-on-one lots of times. And so I'm not sure why you had to specifically say that they need to find, if I'm alone with somebody and I gotta find somebody to back me up to say that I'm not doing anything, or I'm reading this wrong. Maybe I'm misinterpreting.
I could speak to this one a little bit. The church that I've gone to for 30 years, 20 years ago, we made that a policy at the church too, that, you know, for Sunday school and stuff, you always had two adults that would teach the Sunday school classes and stuff. But that was something that was done 20 years ago, Jim, at a church.
So what do teachers do?
I don't know. I can't.
I mean,
I'm not in that profession. I wear enough hats, so.
But what I'm saying, it needs to be consistent. Why are you identifying your people who are working with kids to say, oh, I better get a hold of Grant and back me up in case somebody says I've done something wrong? It just kind of struck a sour note with me for your staff you're insinuating that, I know you're protecting the staff, but anyway, it just kind of caught my eye that with all the things that are going on with all the different professions, you're looking for somebody to say, oh, I'm with Grant, I better get somebody to say I'm not molesting him or harassing. That's the interpretation I take when you put that in there, so.
Chair, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, JJ.
Thank you. I can, I'm doing this now. Teachers and social workers, counselors, anybody who works with children and will be alone with them has to have a vulnerable records police check. And it's a specific one that is much more thorough than regular ones to ensure there is nothing, even sealed information about interactions with children that were inappropriate would be brought forward in one of those checks. So unless the staff here are going to have these checks, the teachers have them, and that's why they can be alone.
Okay, so I could follow up on that question. I was on the Y board for years and I sat beside Murray Faulkner in London, the old retired police chief. He says they're useless. He said, all that does is tell you what they've done up to now. Next day, they could go out there and do whatever they want, and they've never been caught, never had the police check or whatever, are all perfect. Next day, it can create a problem. So that's what Murray told me.
I mean, they have to be renewed,
yeah.
But they're only good for a period of time. But I mean, I had a prof at Western who discussing sainthood for people who are alive said he didn't agree with it because Mother Teresa could open a brothel tomorrow. But you can't,
Oh, man.
you can't hold people. I guess the comment that they could do it tomorrow means then nobody anywhere ever should be able to be allowed. This is something that's done as without perfection, but has been very effective at eliminating people who shouldn't be teaching.
When they have a pass record. Anyway,
It's a vulnerable records check.
What's you just go by JJ or?
Go by JJ John Joseph. Yeah.
I'm gonna call you John Joseph.
Just my opinion.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Jim.
That's all.
All right, moving on to,
Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
I would just like to make a comment. Thank you for bringing it up. When I was reading this, I was thinking of a single man water rescue because we have Gilwood Lake. So thinking about there has to be people on the shoreline before you can actually go into the water to make sure that there is another staff member there, and thinking about the pool situation as well. So I appreciate the language that's in there, but I also appreciate what Jim and other members are actually saying, that there is, you know, sometimes extenuating circumstances that need to be taken into account.
Hopefully it can be done, so they can find somebody.
Okay.
DJ?
Yeah, through the chair, Elizabeth, when interviews are done through, say, Zoom or remote software, before a person is hired, do they have a follow-up interview in person? Or
Mr. Chair, to JJ, the only time that we're using electronic interviews is for seasonal staff, so they tend to be a very limited hire. Right now, we're not doing a follow-up interview with the seasonal staff, but anything contract staff, full-time staff, we're still doing those interviews in person. It's just that the seasonal staff, just due solely to the volume of people that we have to interview and bring on board. And a lot of those students are usually still in school and trying to do interviews from Lakehead all over, that we've made those accommodations for electronic interviews.
okay,
The preference still is in person.
yeah, I've just done some research on remote communications with Indigenous communities. And one of the biggest problems with remote communications is that people lie, that they're far more likely to be untruthful. And so that's why, you know, if it was for an important position, but that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
To the chair, and you have to remember too, when you're interviewing a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old, they're not gonna have any research. They're gonna be clear. Honorable check will be clear. It's not like a 40 or 50-year-old maybe has some back history. So the younger ones, and anyway, it's not an issue with me. I just was clarifying in my own mind how you want to work this, trying to find someone to back somebody up. Anyway, that's fine.
Okay, can I get a mover and seconder that the personnel policy be approved as presented? JJ? Grant?
Baldwin Sands.
Yes.
Burrs,
Yes.
Herbert,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Strybosh,
Yes,
Trousseau,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
and Noble.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Okay. March planning and regulation report. Are you speaking to this?
Maisa is going to
Maisa.
speak to this. Yeah.
Okay, well, hello, everyone. So for planning, we did have a few notices come through that we commented on. There was nothing really that stood out. No real objections or anything of note, to be honest. Pretty standard things, so. Unless you have a question about any of them, yeah.
Is there any questions?
Okay.
So this is the planning, I'm looking for the permit. There we go. So only a few permits were issued, we'll talk about one after. And yeah, I'm not sure if we want to talk about any of them, but nothing really stood out in the meeting, so.
And, can I get a mover and seconder? John Wilson? Oh, you had a question, John?
And this is not directly pertaining, well, in Malahide, we've had issues with wanting to dredge out Port Bruce. What we've been told is you have to put whatever's dredged out into a spot in the lake that has the same soil type, whatever. Is that like how this is being done, or? Cause I'm just sort of wondering if we're being not necessarily fed a line, but cause we'd like to dredge out Port Bruce Harbor to make the stuff flow better for breakup. And just wondering what maybe I should talk to you offline about this, just what the process is about it, because we've had a hell of a time convincing anyone that we should just have Port Bruce. So just wondering how you go about it at Port Stanley.
Well, it is a big project, and I think you were looking at the marina, is that what kind of sparked this? Yeah. So in that case, they dredged that small section of marina, they test it to make sure there's nothing contaminated or unexpected in there, and in that case, it actually went to a landfill. So it depends on what the soil quality is or the sediment quality is, and whether or not can be reused in that area or have to be disposed.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but we can talk about it after for sure.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, mover and seconder for that report? Lori, John?
On the motion, Baldwin Sands.
Yes.
Burrs,
Yes.
Bert,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Drybosh,
Yes.
Rousseau,
Yes,
Wilson,
Yes.
and Noble.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Motion to move into closed?
Mr. Chair, just before we do that, I do have another agenda item that I'd like to add to the closed session. It's another legal matter on a violation.
Okay,
I think I have to declare on that.
Yeah, Brett's gonna declare.
okay. Everybody's good with that? Okay. Mover and seconder to move into closed then? John? James?
Baldwin Sands.
Yes.
Burrs,
Yes.
Herbert,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Drybosh,
Yes.
Trousseau,
yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
and Noble.
Yes.
And we're enclosed as of 10:45.